Welcome. Sorry, let's solve Leetcode 3105. Longest strictly increasing or strictly decreasing subarray. Okay, let's make this slightly bigger so we can read it. You're given an array of integers nums. Return the number, return the length of the longest subarray of nums, which is either strictly increasing or strictly decreasing. Okay, let's go over the first example. So we're given this 14332, and if we're focusing on strictly increasing for these values, only 1 and 4 is 1 and 4 is strictly increasing, and so that gives us a value of 2. For decreasing, we have either 4 and 3 or 3 and 2. Remember, strictly increasing or strictly decreasing does not allow for adjacent duplicate entries. So in this case, either 4-3 or 3-2, 3-2 work. 3-3 is breaks the continuity. Okay, in this example, the answer is 1, and for example 3, the result is 3. Okay, so the problem seems straightforward enough, so let's get started. What we'll do is we'll just basically track each adjacent pair of numbers, and if a number is increasing, we'll add to that count, and if the number is decreasing, we'll add to that count. So we'll have 3 case statements. Okay. So if number is increasing, and then we'll have an else if for decreasing, and then we'll have an else when the numbers are we'll just say a duplicate. Okay, so that's basically the approach. So let's get started. I'll explain the approach as we coded along, because I don't think it's too difficult, and neither do they, because they've indicated that this is an easy problem. So what we'll do is we'll say we'll initialize maybe a max value. We'll initialize an initial increasing value and a decreasing value, and we'll set them all equal to 1. So it should make sense that that if at the very least one value is increasing or decreasing. At the end, we'll return the max. We'll just get that out of the way now. Okay, so let's get started. So what we'll want to do is loop through all of the numbers. So for, and we'll use maybe the index, because remember, we want to compare the adjacent pairs. Okay, so now we look for this here. So how do we check that? We say if nums so if this is true, we can increment our INC count. So for example, suppose we have numbers like this. In this case, suppose we have so it should be clear that we can increment this. Remember, we start increment here, and then if the next value is 5, we can increment the INC variable. But at the same time, this in essence negates or resets the decrement variable. So let's do that. Okay, so I think that should be clear enough. And same thing for this scenario. If we have the opposite of this, So if we have this scenario, well, we'll just basically do something similar to this here. We're going to reinitialize this and increment this. Otherwise, we're at this type of situation, which means we reset both of them. Okay, so then for every number, for every element of the list, we'll want to update our max value if possible. Okay, and that should be it. Let's test it. Okay, looks good. Let's submit it. Okay, great. Good job. Now let's try solving this using C++. Okay, so let's change the language, and we'll be using the same exact approach, so it should be relatively straightforward. So we'll say we'll initialize max again, increasing, decreasing. Okay, and then we'll set up our for loop. Okay, let's not forget to return our result. Okay, so let's set up our conditionals again. So remember, we're looking for these three things. If adjacent values are increasing, decreasing, or else. So if we have this here, we can say, okay, well, let's check for this. If nums I what do we do here? We can do this here and this here. Otherwise, we have this here. And we can kind of duplicate this here. And let's modify it a little bit. So remember what's happening here. If we have something like, suppose we have something like, so initially we set this to 7. Sorry, well, all of them just, sorry, not 7. We initialize all of these to 1. And if our next number is, so remember what we're doing here, we're examining the next number. So in this case, we'd be looking at is 5, well, in this case, we'd be looking at is 5 greater than 7, so it isn't. But here, though, we have is 5 less than 7, so then we would increment, decrement. So remember, it was 1 initially, and after this, it would be 2. Then we loop around again, and then now we're comparing 3 to 5. And if it's a decreasing, then we increment, decrement. Oh, interesting. I almost made a mistake here. I'm glad I went over this. We need to reset each of these. So glad I went over it. Yeah, here we go. So if when we're at 3, then we initialize this to 1. That's right. That's better. Great. Otherwise, that means we're seeing a duplicate, so we can reinitialize both of them. Now, remember the max function is slightly different in C++ than it is for Python. So we'll have to make a slight modification. We'll do something like this here. Which really isn't a big deal, but it's a subtle issue that we need to account for. Let's test it. I think it should be fine. Oh, I must have accidentally submitted it. Okay, in any case, we did really well in Python and C++. Okay, great. Good job. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments and I'll try my best to answer them. Other than that, if you found this video helpful or beneficial or educational, please consider liking or subscribing. Other than that, have a wonderful day. Take care of yourself. Cheers.